Samuel Sey's article does a great job. Let me just read you a little portion of it. Over time, the term social justice became associated with critical theorists and neo-Marxists from the Frankfurt School in Germany. They rejected universal rights or human rights as a basis for justice. They essentially rejected liberty for individuals as the hallmark for justice in society. They believed instead that parity between groups were the mark of justice in society. Now, see, let me just stop right there. That's nothing you ever find in Scripture. You do find parity before God in one's spiritual relationship to Him, but you do not find economic parity. Economic fairness, yes, but there is no call for the rich to become poor and the poor to become rich and all the rest of that kind of stuff. It's just not there. They believed instead that parity between groups was the mark of justice in society. They rejected individualism and embraced collectivism. Now think about it. If a society gives freedom to individuals, there are just some people that are really good at making money. And then there are other people that are not. And as a result, you're going to have disparity in how much people possess, how much they own. And that is necessary in a society that honors individual freedom, individual effort, labor, gifting, whatever it might be. What we are hearing, what we're listening to in our society today is a creeping Marxist concept that denies individualism, promotes collectivism, and as a result, pretends to produce equality of result. Now, as everybody knows who's read anything about socialism and communism, it never works that way. You always have the elite. You always have people who have more than others. They just become the party people, you know, the people that are in control of suppressing everybody else's rights. But that's the panacea. And our educational system no longer educates people about that. And so you've got a bunch of young people going, that sounds really great. And we're repeating it once again. I posted a cartoon. It said, it is very true that those who do not study the past are doomed to repeat it. But it is equally true that those who do study the past are doomed to sit around and watch everybody else repeat it that doesn't study history. And helplessly sit around while the past is repeated by those who don't study history. And it's true. It's just true. So anyway, they did not define justice as equality of opportunity. They defined justice as equality of outcome. This is the issue. This is the issue. In listening, for example, to the Witness the Drop the Mic webcast from the Witness, as I did a run this morning, so I listened to it on my run. And you know, one of the things that was said was, well, why is the American evangelical church so white? To which I did not cry out while running and while breathing hard, but the thought crossed my mind, maybe because the majority of people in America are, or at least certainly have been. You know, if the African-American population is like 10%, then would you expect it to be 50%? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. When you're in a minority, the majority is going to be the majority. You're going to be the minority. That's sort of obvious, isn't it? I mean, I don't understand what the objection is until you start running everything through these lenses that do not come from Scripture. And that's one of the things we were saying in the article, is that while we all have lenses, Scripture, by its very nature and its consistency, if it's handled right, can give us the mechanisms to see those lenses and to identify them, the traditions and things like that. I go on. They agreed with Karl Marx that disparities between privileged and underprivileged members of society are indicative of injustice. Not, and I stop again, not that God gives gifts to certain people, not that it is God's will that there be people who are skilled in one area and I'm given certain gifts over here. The gifts I'm given aren't going to allow me to get $168 million NFL contracts or NBA contracts or MLB or whatever else. Do I have a ground for complaining about that? Well, in a neo-Marxist style of thought, yeah. But not from a Christian worldview. Neo-Marxism cuts out all ground of Christian contentment. When you think about how pastorally we seek to inculcate contentment with our lot in life and the gifts that God has given to us, even in the midst of encouraging people to use those gifts to the uttermost and to the fullest, that's perfectly right. I want to honor God in that way. But the reality is that I've known my entire life that there are going to be people who will always have more than me. Okay, that doesn't make me unhappy. I choose not to be unhappy about that. And that's because God has his ways and wisdom. And to be honest with you, I don't want to be accountable for as much as somebody else might be accountable for in the final day, because you're going to answer for those things. Anyway, they believed privileged members of society and underprivileged members of society make up the oppressor and the oppressed. Therefore, for them, justice, social justice, meant eliminating disparities between groups in society. They conclude that justice is when a society implements a system that produces equality of outcome for groups instead of equality of opportunity for individuals. This is why disparities between men and women and disparities between white Americans and black Americans are two of the biggest issues for social justice activists today. This is why white privilege and male privilege are two of the biggest social justice buzzwords today. And it was interesting that in listening to Drop the Mic, that one of the statements was about, look at the lack of women. These men, these brothers, are deeply influenced by this kind of thinking. And I don't think they recognize it. And they don't seem at all to be willing to listen to anyone pointing it out. That's for sure. But what you'll get in Samuel's article is a brief and yet very clear understanding of what the issues are. As he says, the neo-Marxist and critical theorist understanding of social justice is overwhelmingly the definition for social justice today. That is how colleges and universities define social justice. That is how my professors describe social justice to me. That is how many dictionaries define social justice. For instance, Google and the Oxford Dictionary define social justice as justice in terms of the distribution of wealth, opportunities, and privileges within a society. End quote. So in the vast majority of instances, the problem we're experiencing that has been exposed very clearly through the releasing of this statement is that you have a large number of people utilize when social justice is discussed within the church, you define it as biblical justice. But when application is made in society, in the voting booth, it's social justice as defined within society. And that's why there wasn't a specific definition, as in just a single quote, because then everybody's going to say, oh, that's not what I believe. Unless you listen really carefully and closely, and then you discover it's at the foundation of everything they believe. Of everything they believe. So if you go to statement on socialjustice.com, articles, Samuel Sey's article, Social justice is a threat to human rights in the gospel. It's lit.